Buenos días a todos. Daros lo primero la bienvenida a la primera conferencia de Agile Spain. Y bueno, con un poco de retraso, os pedimos disculpas, pero bueno, siempre hay algún pequeño retraso en estos eventos. Os cuento cuál va a ser la agenda de la primera parte de la mañana, que hace la presentación del Congreso. Vamos a tener una muy pequeña presentación sobre lo que es el evento. Luego cederé la palabra a Jesús García, que es el director de la escuela, que es la que nos aloja el evento y la que está cediendo todos los espacios para que esta conferencia sea un éxito. Luego cederé la palabra a Xavier como vicepresidente de la Asociación Agile Spain. Y finalmente os presentaré a Henrik Nieber, que es la persona que va a dar la keynote esta mañana. Entonces, bueno, por mi parte, simplemente contaros quién está detrás de esta conferencia. Pues una serie de personas que han dedicado muchas horas durante, yo creo, 6 meses, más o menos. Que es gente que está dentro de la Asociación Agile Spain y gente que está dentro de la Universidad Politécnica para gestionar todo el tema de infraestructuras. En particular, gente del grupo SIST, Systems and Software Technologies. Y bueno, también me gustaría agradecer a todos los patrocinadores que estáis aquí, fundamentalmente al patrocinador Oro, AT Sistemas, también a los patrocinadores Plata, Paradigma Tecnológico, Microsoft, Softllutions, Innova Prime e Indra. Sin ellos y sin su esfuerzo y sin su confianza en nosotros como organización del evento, esto no habría sido posible. Entonces, ahora cedo la palabra a Jesús para que os dé la bienvenida institucional.
Gracias, Agustín. Bueno, en primer lugar quiero daros la bienvenida a la Escuela Universitaria de Informática y comenzar diciendo que bueno, estáis en vuestra casa. Esto es un centro de informática, al servicio de la informática, digamos, para todos los públicos y especialmente para eventos tan significativos como este. Entonces quiero agradeceros el que estéis aquí en este día, que iniciéis esta conferencia interesante. También felicitar al Agustín, a todas las personas que han estado involucradas en la organización de este evento, que de momento, digamos, ha sido enormemente exitoso hasta el punto que ha habido que cerrar la inscripción y ha habido gente que, digamos, por problemas, digamos, de aforo previsto para el evento, pues no han podido estar aquí. Entonces esto es un éxito muy notable y entonces, bueno, felicitaros por eso y animaros a seguir en la brecha de reivindicar, digamos, la ingeniería del software. La ingeniería del software como una ingeniería en mayúsculas, ¿de acuerdo? Hay que reivindicar ese papel, hay que distinguir los papeles en el mundo empresarial para que no se confundan, digamos, los distintos niveles que debe tener, digamos, los puestos laborales relacionados con la informática, que un ingeniero no tiene que estar haciendo papeles que corresponden a programadores, etcétera, y que ese papel fundamentalmente lo tenéis que reivindicar vosotros. Desde la Escuela Universitaria de Informática y desde la Universidad Politécnica se reivindicó ese papel de la ingeniería del software y fue, digamos, iniciativa de la Universidad Politécnica el que la actual programación de grados, de titulaciones de grado en la nueva organización de las enseñanzas universitarias, se incluyesen especialidades para los grados, tomadas, digamos, básicamente de referentes de ACM y de Cubo, y fue la Universidad Politécnica la que defendió que existiesen esos 5 grados que oficialmente, digamos, en fichas aprobadas por la CRUE y publicadas en el BOE, pues se ha organizado, al menos académicamente, esperemos que también en el futuro se pueda organizar profesionalmente, la ingeniería informática. En ese sentido, esta escuela, bueno, quiero decir, ya estamos impartiendo la titulación de ingeniería del software, vamos a tener titulados, graduados en ingeniería del software este mismo año, porque hemos implantado 3 cursos simultáneamente, y nada más que animaros, la escuela, digamos, está con la ingeniería del software, nos interesa muchísimo desarrollar la ingeniería del software y apoyar a todos los que estáis involucrados en este mundo, y nada más que desearos que esta conferencia, estas jornadas sean de mucho éxito, que obtengáis resultados, que compartáis la experiencia entre todos vosotros y que eso os ayude, digamos, a reivindicar el papel que tenéis que reivindicar tanto a nivel académico como a nivel profesional en las empresas. Entonces, bienvenidos a todos y estáis en vuestra casa. Gracias.
Gracias, Jesús, por alojarnos. Y bueno, ahora, Xavi, tienes la palabra para tu lucimiento y para dar una inmejorable presentación e iniciación de esta conferencia Yale Spain.
Hola. ¿Sí me oye? ¿Sí? Ayer cuando venía en el AVE con mi amigo Joao, le pregunté, ¿por qué crees que va a venir la gente a la conferencia? Y me dijo él, bueno, pues para ser más productivos. Y yo le dije, ¿y qué más? Dice, pues para hacer mejores proyectos. Y digo, ya, ¿pero por qué? Dice, pues para disfrutar más en nuestro trabajo. Y dije, ahí le has dado, es eso. O sea, al final lo que queremos es hacer mejores proyectos, que nuestros clientes estén más contentos y también pasarlo bien en todo lo que estamos haciendo. Por eso hemos hecho esta conferencia. Hemos trabajado mucho para que sea un evento de mucha calidad, en el que podéis aprender muchas cosas. Pensad que solo se han podido aceptar el 20% de las propuestas que se han enviado, o sea, el 80% se ha quedado fuera, habiendo cosas muy buenas, tema de aforo también, pero bueno, ha sido un tema habiendo unas comisiones que han estado mirándoselas duramente y han intentado seleccionar lo mejor para que nos aporte muchísimo valor. Hemos traído también a un keynote de excepción, Henrik Niebuhr, que bueno, supongo lo conoceréis, después os explicará su biografía, los libros que tiene y todo su compromiso con el movimiento ágil. Tendremos una mesa redonda de expertos, tendremos 6 talleres y también hemos cuidado mucho el espacio de networking, que haya momentos en los cuales podamos conocernos, compartir experiencias. ¿Y quién hay detrás de todo esto? Pues detrás de todo esto está una comunidad que es Agile Spain, que supongo que la mayoría conoceréis, por los foros, esencialmente, también por los grupos locales. Hay grupos locales que mensualmente o cada mes y medio se reúnen en Madrid, en Barcelona, Castilla, León, zona norte. En Levante también se está montando un grupo, en Canarias. Y son momentos también en el que pasamos del modo virtual a vernos cara a cara, que es mucho más fácil para eso, conocer cómo hacen otras personas. Y bueno, en referencia a esto, os quiero invitar a que esta tarde hay 2 sesiones referentes, una a grupos locales, las cuales, pues, si estáis interesados en conocer cuál es el grupo local más cercano, si queréis montar uno nuevo, si queréis saber cómo dinamizar más vuestro grupo, pues podéis ir. Y después, a las 7:30, hay una reunión sobre la propia comunidad, cuáles serían los siguientes pasos. Por ejemplo, una cosa bastante importante que vamos a hacer ahora será el Agile Open en Barcelona en otoño. Y una ultimísima noticia es que España va a organizar la próxima conferencia XP 2011, que va a ser en Madrid. Y nosotros, todos vosotros, si queréis, podéis participar también en lo que es la organización de este evento internacional. Me gustaría agradecer muchísimo el esfuerzo dedicado también, aparte de la Universidad Politécnica, por habernos dejado toda la infraestructura, sus voluntarios, al equipo de organización que ha estado detrás de todo esto, que ha hecho un esfuerzo muy, muy grande, a los comités también, que han estado revisando sesiones, revisando talleres, revisando lo que ha sido toda la parte de contribuciones. Y me gustaría dar unas pequeñas cifras al respecto. Que para que os hagáis una idea, han sido 4.500 mensajes en 6 meses, lo cual nos ha dejado súper achicharrados. Hay gente que no podía ni seguir el ritmo. De hecho, hay que pensar que esto, normalmente una conferencia como esta se organiza en un año y nosotros la hemos organizado en 6 meses. En enero decidimos si hacer un go o no go por el poco tiempo que había, con lo cual, pues eso, hemos estado trabajando bastante duro, en forma de Scrum distribuido, evidentemente, no podía ser de otra manera, con una reunión de sincronización semanal, nuestras retrospectivas y también con nuestras broncas semanales por nuestras parejas. O sea, ha sido todo bastante durillo, pero hemos aprendido mucho, hemos disfrutado mucho. Me gustaría hacer una mención especial a las personas que han estado trabajando más en todo esto. de organización. A nivel de organización de infraestructura y comisiones, a Agustín Yagüe, a Carmen Vidal, a Gustavo Cebrián, a Juan Gutiérrez, a Vicens García, a Rodrigo Corral, a Xavi Albaladejo. A nivel de presupuestos y pagos, a Jorge Uriarte, José Ramón Díaz, Ángel Medinilla. A nivel de comunicación, a Harald Messemer, a Ricardo Roldán, que también ha participado en el montaje de la web, a Carlos Ble y a Xavier Quesada, que muy amablemente nos ha cedido el hosting de la conferencia. También me gustaría mucho agradecer a todos vosotros que estáis aquí, muchos de vosotros por las propuestas que habéis enviado, aunque algunas se han quedado fuera, pero es lo que ha hecho elevar la calidad del evento. También porque habéis luchado bastante por venir, o muchísimo, convenciendo a vuestros jefes, o no convenciéndolos y teniéndolo que pagar de vuestro bolsillo, y con días de vacaciones. Porque además, sin vosotros, esto no tendría sentido. El evento es para difundir la agilidad, con lo cual lo más importante es que estéis vosotros aquí ahora mismo. Somos cerca de 300 personas, con lo cual se puede considerar que esto es un éxito. Pusimos el cartel de no hay entradas hace una semana, y sintiéndolo mucho, hay bastantes personas que han pedido poder venir. Lo que pasa es que ya el aforo estaba súper ya cubierto y hicimos una pequeña ampliación en el último momento, pero ha sido imposible ya que pudiese venir más personas. Y por último, me gustaría incidir un poco en lo que es el lema de la conferencia, y es que esto es real, haciendo realidad la agilidad. O sea, hay muchas empresas que están trabajando de esta manera. Son empresas que buscan innovación, que buscan productividad, que quieren ser muy competitivos, que por cierto son las recetas de anticrisis que alguien podría apuntar. Y bueno, supongo que conoceréis referentes al respecto, como por ejemplo Google, Nokia, la BBC, Telefónica y más en España, nuestros patrocinadores, startups. Ahora mismo todas las startups que comienzan lo hacen de esta manera. Tengo un amigo, también Rudy, que me dijo es freelance y trabaja como desarrollador para startups. Y él me explicó, ostras Xavi, explícame esto de Scrum qué es, porque en todos los sitios de Scrum, Stream Programming, en todos los sitios donde voy para seguir mi nueva etapa como freelance, para trabajar, en todos ya me piden esto. O sea que realmente esto ya es efervescente y ya no se puede parar. Es decir, que nosotros, aparte de estas empresas internacionales que trabajan de esta manera, nosotros también podemos hacerlo, lo estamos haciendo, cada vez somos más personas, tenemos éxito en nuestros proyectos trabajando de esta manera. De hecho, muchos creemos que no hay otra manera de hacerlo en este momento mejor. Lo cual no quiere decir que sea fácil. No es fácil trabajar así. Pero requiere un poco más de inteligencia, ¿no? Más de disciplina. Pero es mucho mejor. Con lo cual, pues para aprender precisamente a hacerlo de esta manera, pues hoy tenéis este evento en el que lo que toca es aprender, conocer personas, compartir experiencias, y el que se anime, pues colaborar con la comunidad en la organización de siguientes eventos o lo que sea necesario. Y, sobre todo, empezar el lunes. El lunes, cuando lleguéis a vuestros trabajos, pues con las ideas que tenéis, lo que habréis aprendido nuevo, pues empezar a hacer algo, poco a poco. Hay que llegar hasta allí, pues hay que empezar a moverse. Si no lo hacemos nosotros, ¿quién lo va a hacer? Bueno, esperemos que os guste mucho la conferencia y gracias a todos por haber venido.
Bueno, ya queda poco para que empecemos. Un poquito más, un poquito de calma. ¿Cuál es el futuro cercano del agilismo en España? Bueno, pues como ya os ha anunciado Xavi, algún día del mes de octubre, o algún día del mes de septiembre, más o menos en otoño, tendremos el segundo Agile Open, intentando seguir las pautas de lo que fue el primer Agile Open aquí en la escuela, donde os invitamos a participar. Intentaremos que sea, como en la ocasión anterior, un evento gratuito y, bueno, la sede en Barcelona. Todavía está por determinar exactamente las instalaciones, pero será en Barcelona. Y la segunda cita importante, y con eso, bueno, yo creo que debemos felicitarnos todos en España, y es que la 12ª Conferencia Internacional en Desarrollo Ágil de Software, la conocida XP, se va a celebrar en España en 2011, del 10 al 13 de mayo. Está ya habilitado el web, lo tenéis en la dirección http://xp2011.org y bueno, ahí iremos publicando toda la información relevante, cuáles son las fechas para enviar tanto talleres, sesiones, contribuciones y irá poco a poco apareciendo la información. Intentaremos que la información nos llegue a través de los canales de Agile Spain, aparte de los canales propios de la conferencia XP. Y tenemos que intentar, bueno, hace una semana estaba en Noruega hablando con la gente del Steering Committee, que es la gente que está coordinando y controlando que XP siga viviendo. Y cuando les comenté que esta semana teníamos un evento con 250 personas que estaban interesadas en el agilismo en España, estaban realmente emocionados. Decían, esto en España es imparable y bueno, a ver si conseguimos que el año que viene los que estáis aquí podáis venir a XP y podamos convencer a la comunidad internacional que España también cuenta en el agilismo, que no somos unos cuantos perdidos por ahí. Como dice Xavi, cada vez están pidiendo en las empresas más gente que tenga estos conocimientos, que tenga, si queréis, esta forma de trabajar, porque nosotros lo que queremos es hacer bien nuestro trabajo y que nos dejen trabajar sin hacer más horas de trabajo a la semana. Ese tiene que ser al final también nuestro objetivo, que podamos tener vida. Y ese es el futuro cercano. Pero bueno, ahora simplemente una pequeña información organizativa. Todos en los flyers tenéis organizadas las sesiones como sala 1, sala 2, sala 3, sala 4, sala 5. Por cuestiones de logística, hasta que no tuviéramos conocimiento de cuánta gente ibais a estar por aquí, no hemos hecho pública exactamente los espacios reservados. Entonces, para que os ubiquéis, estamos ahora mismo en lo que es la sala 5 del evento, que es el salón de actos del campus. Los que tengáis la sesión aquí, pues os vais a sentir un poquito amplios, vais a tener espacio para correr incluso si hace falta en el juego que vais a tener luego a partir de las 11:15. La primera de las salas de talleres, la sala 1, está ubicada en el bloque 3, tercera planta, aula 4, sala 2. A ver, esto parece un galimatías, pero es muy sencillito. Salís por el pasillo, por donde habéis venido, os encontráis una garita donde están el personal de administración y servicio de la escuela, subís a la tercera planta y ahí ya está señalizada. La 3304-2, conforme subís las escaleras, está al fondo. Para el segundo taller, la 3304-1, os la vais a encontrar igual al lado, en la pared de enfrente, según subís por las escaleras, al lado del ascensor. Son salas con la capacidad adecuada para los talleres que se van a celebrar. Lo que está en la documentación en el flyer como sala 3 está un poquito más lejos, es la sala de grados de la Escuela Universitaria de Informática, pero no tenéis pérdida tampoco. Salís del salón de actos, llegáis al pasillo, pasáis la garita, llegáis al pasar la garita, lo siguiente que os encontréis es un hall, es el hall del bloque 4, subís una planta y allí está el salón de actos. O sea, está todo también señalizado con la numeración de las salas. Y finalmente, la sala 4, pues como ya he mencionado las otras dos, están en el bloque 3, tercera planta, según subís por las escaleras, a mano izquierda. Y para aquellos que necesitéis utilizar ordenadores, conexión wifi, etcétera, etcétera, ahí tenéis los datos de conexión, el usuario de la wifi. La wifi es wifi UPM y los datos de la wifi son CAS de Conferencia Agile Spain 2010, @invitadosupm y la clave la que tenéis por ahí, /BA D7EF. Tenéis ahí. Y nada más. Lo siguiente, yo creo ya lo que estábamos esperando, la keynote. Bueno, para la keynote, pues permitirme ahora que os presente a Henrik Niebuhr. Y bueno, voy a hacer una breve reseña. Y bueno, lo que os pediría ahora es que me permitiríais que tratara de hacer la presentación en inglés, porque bueno, vamos a hablar de Henrik y yo creo que es lo que procede. So let me turn to English to introduce to Henrik Niebuhr. Henrik is a consultant at CRISP in Stockholm, Sweden. Yes. He is certified Scrum trainer and member of the Agile Alliance Board. I think he's one of the most relevant person in the world in these topics. Yes, I think so. And one of his passions is to help companies to be success with lean, agile, software development in practice. He will talk about Scrum, Lean, and many topics today.
The essence of Agile.
Okay. He's spent a lot of time writing and coaching and writing books, and maybe the most relevant books are Scrum and XP from the trench, and the last one, Kanban and Scrum, making the most of the both. So, start, please.
No, ja estem al mig ja, estem al...
Thank you.
Just per començar al final. Vinga, entra. Perdona.
Let's try it. Like that?
Yes.
How about that? Maybe the other one has more volume.
Okay.
Or? Yeah, we'll use this one. No. So is this okay or is it too loud? It's all right? Yeah? Okay, it's all right. No Wi-Fi. Don't need Wi-Fi. And there we go. So it's a great honor to be here in the first Agile conference in Spain. Oh, congratulations. I'm impressed by so many people coming here for the first conference. So obviously I don't speak Spanish, as you can hear. And how many of you speak Swedish? No, nobody? Okay, so English, is that okay? Yeah. Compromise, right? Let me just get this thing. This is great. It gives me an electric shock when I have 10 minutes left, so then I know that. So I started thinking about, for the first Agile conference, what is the most important thing that everybody should kind of understand about Agile in order to make the most of a conference like this. That's why I chose this title, The Essence of Agile. I'd also like to mention that these two books are available in Spanish. So thanks a lot for those of you who contributed to translating these. They're downloadable for free at infoq.com if you want to learn more. So what is all this stuff? All these words, right? Pair programming and Lean, and TDD, continuous integration. It's confusing, right? So I'm going to try to clarify a little bit what these are about. I'm going to give you a 1-week course in about 1 hour. So if it feels kind of fast, it's because it's fast. So let's start here. Since the title of this conference is Agile, let's start with the word Agile. The whole reason why the Agile movement came about was because a lot of projects worked kind of like this. There's the goal for some project, right? And here's the canon. And this is us trying to aim for the goal. And this is the project planning process going on. We have to aim because we want to hit this goal. So we have to aim very carefully. So we create this big plan and big detailed requirements, etc. And we have to aim carefully because we only have one shot. And once the project is launched, we can't change anything. So we just have to hope. So there goes the project. I hope it's going to work. And then it turns out that, darn, we weren't so good at aiming. And it also turns out that there are surprises along the way, things we didn't know. It's windy outside. And it turns out that the goal wasn't where we thought it was. It's already familiar, huh? And it's moving. And the longer the project is, the more it moves. So it's a problem. And half of the stuff we build is never used. Half of the features, on average, in a system is never used. So sometimes it's even higher. So why do we do this so often? Probably because we built this model on 3 assumptions, very convenient assumptions. One assumption is the customer knows what the customer wants. It would be really nice if that was true, right? The developers know how to build it up front. It's a convenient assumption, and nothing will change along the way. And if these assumptions are true, then maybe this model is fine. In fact, sometimes this model does work, and maybe it's in those unique cases where these 3 assumptions are true. But of course, in most cases, none of these assumptions are true, and then the model breaks. So that's kind of what triggered Agile. The term Agile was coined at this meeting in 2001, where a bunch of people, very, very experienced Agile or developers, who over a long time had been trying to figure out how do we succeed with software development, or how do we not fail as often at least. And so these are the people who invented extreme programming and TDD and Scrum and Wiki and all kinds of things that we use every day. So they actually managed to agree on something, because they met to just talk about, well, Jeff's like, I invented Scrum, and we have Kent Beck who invented XP, and they're talking about, are these different processes, or is there something in common? Can we agree on anything? Or are we all kind of working on different solutions? And everybody was very surprised when they actually managed to agree on something. 17 people over, in combination with beer and skiing. So it's pretty impressive. It's worth noting that this is a pretty homogeneous group. They're all middle-aged white American men. That's a pretty homogeneous group. But still very interesting what they managed to agree on. And it's written, someone came up with a great idea of writing it down on a site too. So you can all go in here, agilemanifesto.org. How many have been there? Now, there's a really cool thing now, lately, thanks to Angel Medenia, is that how I pronounce? And everybody who helped out, it's actually been translated. So if you scroll down, you see a link to España, right? Spanish. So it's actually being translated to 20 languages right now. This is kind of my project right now in the Agile Alliance, to get this thing translated to every language in the world, including Klingon and Navi and all other languages, right? So we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And there's a Spanish translation. So basically, process and tool is important, but they should support communication. They shouldn't try to replace it or get in the way. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Documentation is useful, but software is even more important. Get stuff out the door that works and get feedback from real users. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. On projects where the customer and the supplier kind of act as if they're sitting in the same boat together tend to succeed. And projects where they kind of sit on different sides of a negotiation table trying to push the risk over to the other party tend to fail. That was their experience. And finally, responding to change over following a plan. The projects that treat the plan as a tool that can be adapted tend to succeed. And projects that treat the plan as the goal tend to fail. Now, very important though is there is value in the items on the right, but we value the items on the left more. So some people go too far. Like, oh, Agile, that's great. We don't need a plan. We don't need tools. We don't need contracts. Right? We don't need documentation. We just throw it all out and everything just magically works out. Well, it doesn't. Right? So you got to find a balance. Is what it's about. And then there's a bunch of principles behind. I'm not going to read through them, but this is pretty much the whole Agile Manifesto. These 4 value statements and a bunch of principles. And so what's the metaphor then? Well, if the traditional project is more like shooting a cannon, this is more like the guided missile. So the assumptions are different. That's why this is a paradigm shift. The assumptions are different. We assume that the customer discovers what he wants. Even though he might have some kind of idea, it is a voyage of discovery. And same thing for developers. They discover how to build it. Maybe I have a rough idea of the architecture, but I'll learn things as we go along and I'll adapt. And many things change along the way. So how do you do a project under these assumptions? Well, use this metaphor, guided missile. Don't waste too much time aiming, because the goal isn't where you think it is and it's moving. And I'm bad at aiming. So don't waste time doing that. Aim just a little bit and then get the missile flying. Right? So these are the iterations. Now after every iteration, this missile has a great gadget there which can decide where am I right now and which direction is the goal and approximately how far away is it. And then I might turn. So this happens throughout the whole project. So all the time that we normally would have spent up front trying to make a big plan, that time is still there, but it's spread out across the whole project. As we stop and look at, okay, where are we now? Where is the goal? So a surprise turns up, well, we turn. The goal moves, we turn, etc. until we reach. So sometimes it's a straight line, sometimes it's more like this, wavy. Right? So this is the Agile project kind of metaphor. It's important to note also that it's not like that's the requirements iteration, that's the design iteration, that's the code iteration, and that's the test iteration. That's not really what we mean by iterative development. There's a little bit of everything in every iteration. Right? A little bit of everything in every iteration. So another core concept in all agile methods is time boxing. So suppose we have a project here. It's a 4-week project and we're supposed to deliver 4 features, A, B, C, D. And suppose that this project is doomed to fail for some reason that, well, let's say there's something in the architecture is not going to work out or something. So there's a nasty surprise waiting for us and this plan just won't succeed. So what happens? Well, traditionally, we start with a false promise. We will deliver A, B, C, D in 4 weeks. How can we know that? We can't. But that's still what it says in the contract. So what happens? Well, the project gets delayed. Nothing gets delivered after 4 weeks. And maybe if you're lucky, something gets delivered after 8 weeks, after being 90% done for 4 weeks. And then, if we're lucky, the thing that we delivered is still something that the customer wants. This is a traditional project. If you look at studies such as Standish Group, chaos reports, we'll see that this is the normal case. That projects are way, way, way late, and nothing happens on the planned release date. So, what's the agile scenario then, under the same conditions? Well, try to avoid the false promise. Instead, the promise is more honest. We always deliver something every sprint. A sprint is just a Scrum word for iteration. Right? We always deliver something on a regular basis. That's a promise. Now, this is just an estimate. We think we can finish A, B, C, D during this time period, but we aren't sure. Right? And this third one is a promise. We always deliver the most important items first. So what happens after 4 weeks? In this case? Something comes out. It's a rule, right? If you're running an agile process, something's got to come out. So in this case, AB, because we couldn't finish everything. So instead of oops, we're late, it's oops, we only finished AB. Our velocity is lower than we thought. What should we do now? And we talk to the customer. Now, this might not be a very nice model either. I mean, we have a kind of disappointed customer, but at least we didn't lie to them, right? At least we haven't broken a promise. And we're giving them a whole bunch of business options now. They can shut down the project because it's getting too expensive. And it's like, if a project is going to die, let it die early, right? Fail fast. Or we might stop here. This is good enough. AB is 90% of the value. So why should we spend another 4 weeks implementing the last 10%? Right? Cut the tail. Or maybe, well, I see that you're on the right track, so please continue. And then we do this. Or, oh, is it taking that long? Okay, well, given that information, and now that I see what my competitors are doing, let's surprise them. Let's change the plan. Well, let's build E instead of C. Right? So we're giving all these options. But most importantly, the reason why this model is better is because this model includes that model. You can do this and look at that and then change your mind and go back and do this, right? But you can't do the opposite. You can't go back in time. If you start here and we get to 8 weeks and we deliver everything after 8 weeks, we can't say, oops, we're late. Darn, can't we please go back in time and get a sub-delivery here after 4 weeks? It's too late. That's why it's important to really respect the time box. Another core feature, well, this is related, is the value of small and frequent releases. And a good comparison is subway. Right? If you're going to take a subway or a train, if it leaves every 3 minutes, if we have a subway coming in every 3 minutes, how many of you would look at the time schedule before you go to the subway? Probably one, right? Only one. Because if you come, you just go take the next train. And if you miss the train, so what? There's another one in 3 minutes. So no big worry. If the train leaves every half hour, every 30 minutes, how many of you would look at the timetable before you go? Just about everybody. You don't want to miss that. You want to time that one subway. And if you barely miss it, you're going to get angry. Darn, you might run after it and try to squeeze in, right? And might even get killed doing it, right? So you get a lot of frustration and a lot of overhead planning when you have releases that aren't so frequent. So here's a boat that leaves every week. You can imagine, right? So the same thing in IT projects. If you have a release every half year, people are going to be fighting hard to get their stuff into that release. And if something didn't make it, there's going to be anger. And there's going to be a lot of planning to make sure the right stuff gets in. If you have a release train every week, or every second week, or every month, it's not as much overhead and not as much frustration. So there is no real agile method. There's a whole bunch of methods that fulfill agile values. And the most popular one at the moment is Scrum. Scrum and XP kind of fit together. I'm going to be talking about both. But Scrum seems to be the most popular starting point for most companies at the moment. There's a whole bunch of other ones. And there are some fairly new ones that come in, like Kanban. I'm going to be talking about several of these now. So an agile method is any method that kind of fits in with the agile principles and values. It doesn't even have to have a name. So let's take a look at the most popular one. Now, how many of you have used Scrum? It's about half, right? So just a high-level summary of Scrum, since it's the most common one. It's also fairly typical. Scrum looks very much like the other ones. The whole idea is split the organization into teams. Take the product, the thing you're building, the thing you're doing, and split it into pieces, where each piece should be some kind of deliverable. Right? And then take time and split it into pieces too. Maybe each piece is 2 weeks or something. And then you sort the pieces by business value, whatever business value means in your domain, but some kind of sorting by business value. And then you take a cross-functional, self-organizing team, and they pull things off the top of the list, and they pull it into a time box, and they focus on that intensively for 2 weeks in this case, and then they deliver. And this happens over and over again, and the product kind of grows like a flower, right? So, and around this, there's process optimization going on, because Scrum doesn't tell you how to test or how you should organize people into teams or how you should, it just doesn't tell you very much. It's just a framework. So you have to experiment. And that's critical, experimentation, adapting the process to your context. In fact, my first book, that Scrum and XP from the Trenches, is just one whole big catalog of our experiments, pretty much. The ones that worked, the ones that didn't work, and some other stuff. So experimenting is critical. So instead of a large group spending a long time building a huge thing, you take a small team who spend a little time building a small thing to reduce risk. But of course, integrating regularly to see the whole. This is the high-level Scrum strategy. As you can see, you can use this outside of software development too. It's just a general way of doing work. Right? So a little bit more detail. Any project has a bunch of stakeholders, people who care, people who want stuff delivered. Right? And the problem is, different types of users, even internal functions like help desk operations, they all want stuff. And they normally want more stuff than we can deliver. And they don't all want the same stuff either. So I have a sound recording. This is an experiment. We'll see if it works. Right? So where's the microphone on this thing? There maybe, or the speaker, I mean.
We want this and that. We demand a share in that and most of that, some of this and fucking all of that. Less of that and more of this and fucking plenty of this. Another thing, we want it now. I want it yesterday. I want fucking more tomorrow. And the demands will all be changed then. So fucking stay awake.
Stay awake. So this is just an example of the kind of problems that you have to fight with in a project. All these people, they want everything. They want it yesterday. They want it now. And everything will change tomorrow. So how do we handle that? Well, that's why there's a role in Scrum called the product owner. And the product owner is supposed to decide, what are we going to build and why? What the vision? And then prioritize between all these stakeholders and own the release plan. Decide, well, what are we going to release first, in what order? This is the product owner role. And the product backlog is just a list of the stuff we're going to release. So maybe the first item is, in a flight booking system, I should build a flight ticket. And maybe sometime later, I should be able to cancel a flight ticket. And maybe the operations guy says, I want to be able to restart the server somehow. And the help desk says, I want to be able to see which users are in the system, etc. Just a list of stuff that needs to get done. And this changes. So it's not, you don't finish it and sign it off. It never finishes. It's a living document. The team, the Scrum team, cross-functional self-organizing. Cross-functional means they have all the skills needed to implement this stuff all the way to releasable, typically. And self-organizing, there's no manager outside allocating tasks to people, deciding who does what. They sort that out themselves, internally, by communicating every day. So they're responsible for how much work to do every iteration. They choose how much work to do based on their capacity. And they're responsible for the implementation, the architecture, and the quality. And Scrum Master role, process leader, process coach, and impediment remover. Impediment is like something blocking the team. It could be physical things like we're not sitting in the same room. That's blocking the team. Or we need faster computers, or we're always being disrupted by those guys over there. The Scrum Master focuses on removing impediments. Think curling, right? Curling. Scrum Master is doing curling in front of the team so they can move fast forward. Right? As a contract between the product owner and the team. Definition of done is like an agreement on what do we mean when we say something is done. We just finished cancel flight ticket. Okay, what does that mean? Can we release it today, or is there something left to do, like performance testing? So this is something that they agree upon. And the sprint backlog is just a subset of the product backlog, which is the subset that we are going to work on this iteration. So the product owner can change this anytime, but the changes don't affect the sprint backlog. They'll affect the next sprint. So the team is focusing on this currently while the product owner is preparing for what's going to happen in the future. So this is a compromise. The team needs to be able to focus to get stuff done. They need to be able to work undisturbed. Right? We, of course, want communication with users, but the communication should be based on the stuff we're working on right now and not a whole bunch of other stuff we might be working on in the future. So the team needs to be able to focus, and that's why we have sprints. At the same time, the product owner needs to be able to be agile, change his mind based on customer feedback. So that's why between each sprint, we can change anything. So sprint is focused, and between each sprint, we can change anything. So this is the guided missile moving. Now, let's take a bit closer look at the product backlog. It contains a bunch of things that you might call agile requirements. Typically not very detailed. They focus on what does the customer need rather than how exactly is the feature going to work. So here's a very common template as a stakeholder. Who wants this? The buyer wants it. What do they want? I want to save my shopping cart. And why? Well, so I can continue shopping later. It's a common template. It allows the team to propose alternative solutions because now they know why the customer needs this. So now they can use their intelligence to find the best possible way of fulfilling the need. And this is important because there's a good quote by Henry Ford, the guy who made the first cars, right, automobiles in the States. And he said, if I asked my customers what they needed, they would have said, we need a faster horse. So you don't just do what your customers ask for. You find out what is their need. Why do they need a faster horse? Oh, they want to move faster from point A to B. That's their need. So, right. Here's an example of a definition of done. Releasable. So when we say this is done, it's releasable, it's acceptance tested, release notes are written, and we haven't messed up the code base, for example. Another thing that happens in Scrum and pretty much all agile methods is estimation. So here's a common technique for that. Estimation pretty much means putting a number on these backlog items, right? And normally it's just a relative number we want. This doesn't need to be days or hours or anything else. It's just a size. So if that's 5 and that's 2, it just means that the second feature is roughly 2 to 3 times bigger than the first feature. So there's a workshop going on this afternoon about agile estimating and planning. If you think this stuff is interesting, go to that workshop. You'll probably get into more details. So how does this number appear? Well, that's the team's job. The team sets estimates. Not a project manager, not the customer, not anybody else. It's the team themselves do it. And a common way of doing that is planning poker. They play cards. It looks very silly, but it works very nice. So if you're curious about planning poker and you haven't seen it before, just Google it and you'll learn about it. You can probably get a hold of some decks of cards too. Works very nice. Right? So what I'm doing is showing you now how does a good implementation of an agile method look like, kind of. What does it feel like? Just to give you some ideas. So let's look at a typical sprint then. Starts with sprint planning meeting. The team and the product owner meet and they decide how much are we going to do. And maybe they break it down into pieces too. Once a sprint is launched, we'll see that the team meets every day, a short meeting, and they talk about what have we done? And what have we done since yesterday? What are we going to do today? And what problems do we have? And what are we going to do about the problems? Right? We might have visitors coming to this meeting to listen, to see what's going on. So it's all about direct communication. And at the end of the sprint, because it's time boxed, right? Time boxing is important. So no matter what happens, something's got to come out. If the team didn't finish everything, well, they release a subset of what they finished. Right? So at the end of the sprint, there's 2 meetings. One is the sprint review, which is the team and the product owner and the key stakeholders who inspect the thing the team just built and give feedback. And based on that feedback, we might update the product backlog. And the retrospective is the second meeting, and that's when we inspect the process. So it's like the first meeting inspecting the product, the second meeting inspecting the process, and talk about, well, what should we improve in the way we work? What should we change? So lots of small changes over time lead to great improvement. So another concept that is used a lot is velocity. Velocity is quite simple. It just means put a number on all the backlog items based on size, like I just showed you, And then at the end of the sprint, just count how much stuff did we finish. So this is like a weight, right? You put a weight on each item. We finished not 8 points. And second sprint, we finished 7 points. And third sprint, we finished 9 points. You start seeing a pattern over time. And that pattern is, okay, somewhere around 8 points per sprint seems to be our capacity. Very useful information, because now we can plan. So here's an example of release planning. There's a product backlog. And let's say today is August the 6th, and we're doing 2-week sprints. And we have a team which has velocity of 30 to 40. Or maybe we have 10 teams, and their combined velocity is 30 to 40. Right? So the capacity of our organization is 30 to 40. What will be done by Christmas? Let's say somebody needs to know because we're going to start a marketing campaign or something. We need to know. So we just do math. 10 sprints till Christmas. If things are slow going, that means 30 points per sprint times 10. So we'll get 300 points. So just add them up and draw a line. All that stuff will probably be done by Christmas. And all that stuff, if we're fast, 40 points per sprint times 10, we'll get to here. So this stuff down here will probably not get done at all, so never mind that. And in the middle, probably some of that will get done, but not all. So the priorities are extra important right there in the middle. So this is important because now we're giving the product owner a chance to make a realistic plan. A realistic plan means we don't need to stress, right? Because stress means bad code. Bad code bites back, right? So, also, this is an easy calculation to be done. I just did it for you in about 30 seconds. You can redo it every iteration. And so maybe you had a plan, and maybe your plan turned out to be wrong. And that happens in Agile projects too. The important thing is to find out early. So we'll find out early that, oops, the plan that we thought we would succeed with is not going to succeed. Well, lucky we found out early because now we can do something about it. We can descope, reprioritize, renegotiate, get more people in, get that difficult person out, or whatever, right? So that was kind of Scrum in a nutshell, and you'll see that most Agile methods kind of look and feel the same. So most of the parts in Scrum are kind of replicated in other Agile methods. Let's take a look at XP. I've seen a lot of Scrum teams suffer because they don't realize how important XP is also. Basically, how do they fit together? XP stands for Extreme Programming, right? So I don't mean the operating system, I mean the process. Basically, Scrum is all about communication. If you look at what's in Scrum, it's all about communication interface between the team and the outside world. XP fills the gap. In other words, what does a team actually do? Scrum doesn't tell you how to write code, how to test, etc. XP gives you a really nice toolkit. And XP also includes most of Scrum. Now, it's important, though, a Scrum team is self-organizing, so you can't force a Scrum team to use XP because that's their own choice. And you can't stop a Scrum team from using XP because it's their choice. So if you're in an Agile team that is doing Scrum and you want to start doing pair programming or you want to start doing test-driven development, don't ask for permission. Just do it. You're a self-organizing team and you're responsible for your process. So XP fits quite nice. It brings up all kinds of good engineering practices like refactoring, simple design, continuous integration, pair programming, test-driven development, etc. And I've seen that there are several workshops and sessions during this conference about things like pair programming and test-driven development. So I won't get into detail. But I will mention why it seems to be a good combination. If we do Scrum and XP, we get a lot of feedback loops. You remember the missile, right? It needs feedback loops to be able to steer. So there are two monks doing pair programming. I bet you didn't know that pair programming has been around for a lot longer than people thought, right? This is from ancient Rome. So with pair programming, you get a lot of advantages, but one of them is feedback loop. So I'm coding and my buddy is next to me. He's looking at me coding and we're talking all the time. And every few minutes or so, the keyboard moves across. We just switch, right? And we're talking all the time. And suddenly maybe I'm writing code and my buddy says, wait a sec, Henrik, shouldn't that 3 be a 2? Oops, and I change it from 3 to 2. So we just found a bug and we fixed it within a few seconds. So that's a feedback loop, very short. The bug was fixed so fast that it didn't even appear inside the bug tracking system. So that's why it's kind of an invisible productivity improvement. Now, sometimes there's a tendency for people that don't do software development themselves. And they look at pair programming and they say, that's not effective. Look, there's 2 people in one computer. That can't be effective. So I'll give you a good answer to that. That is that the bottleneck in a software project is not the keyboard. Right? It's not. So if it was, then that would be ineffective. But the keyboard is not the bottleneck. So when two people are sitting at a computer, they're both working very hard. It just happens to be only one pushing keys. So unit tests, we're writing code to test our code. And we're doing it all the time. So we're bouncing back and forth between the test code and the production code. And we're running the tests very often. So suddenly, let's say we get a red light. Oops, a test now failed. So I'm writing code, run the test, and then red light. Darn. So I don't know why. I don't know what the bug is, but I know that it's something I did during the last 5 minutes. So it's a very small number of changes to look through. And therefore, it's a bug which is very easy to fix, almost free. So no need to open the debugger. So that's a short feedback loop too. Here's another feedback loop, continuous integration. Right? We check in our code, go to lunch. And now the build server is going to test that my system works with the other system over there, that they can work together. And that's a pretty big test to do. It's nothing that I'm going to be doing on my computer quite often. But the build server is very patient. It's doing it all the time. That's why it's called continuous integration. And when the build server finds out that system B doesn't work anymore, it's going to scream. So when we come back from lunch, there's going to be the smoke machine is on, right? The siren is on. This lady comes running in, right? Bad things happen. And this is good because this is an alert. This is an implementation of the lean principle, stop the line. Something is broken. It's like the printer, right? There's a paper jam. Don't keep printing. Stop printing, fix the paper jam, then keep printing, right? Otherwise you get a mess. Right? So this is continuous integration. All this is XP feedback loops. A few seconds, a few minutes, a few hours. If we find out this problem several months later, we have a big problem. So next feedback loop is a daily scrum every day. Talk about, what are our problems and what are we going to do about it. So it takes at most 1 day to find out that somebody in the team is stuck and is having a problem. That's a good feedback loop. And finally, let's say we're doing everything right? Writing really nice, clean code. All the tests are passing. The other systems are working as well, the ones that we're integrating with. And the sprint is having no problems at all. Everything is proceeding according to plan. Thumbs up, except that we're building the wrong product. Right? We're building features the customer doesn't need. That's why we have this demo here, right, to catch that. And remember, that's about half of the features on average that nobody's going to use. So we want to find that out. What half is it that we're not supposed to build? So another important aspect of XP is agile architecture. Some people misinterpret XP and say, oh, good, we don't need architecture, we just code. So they fall into the trap of doing quick and dirty. I build this feature in a very short time. There's a timeline. Happy customer. Great. Build another feature. Happy customer. And you see these features taking a bit longer every time. So quick and dirty becomes slow and dirty. Right? Now we're stuck. We get more and more stuck until we're here. Entropy death. Big bang rewrite. I can't change anything without breaking something else because I have no architecture. So this is what we don't want to do. And of course, this is also what we don't want to do, big upfront design. Let's spend 6 months writing the perfect platform to solve every problem in the world. And then we build features. And wait a sec, where's the customer? They're not here anymore. Hey, we're finished now. They're not there anymore. And maybe we built the features, the demands have all changed. So this is not a good idea either. So it's all about finding a balance, right? Do feature development, do platform development, do architectural development, but do it in an evolutionary way. So the architecture is never finished. It evolves along with the features. The nice thing about this too is you get a nice steady velocity. You can make predictions. A very important aspect of XP that sometimes teams forget about is the importance of clean code. So how many of you have read Bob Martin's book on clean code? I'm just curious. A few, right? So there are a lot of books like that. Michael Feather's book on dealing with legacy code. Anybody read that one? Yeah, there are a few. So the idea is that here's a bunch of code, and there's a tendency sometimes for people, especially investors, to believe that code is an asset. Code is value. Right? The more lines of code, the better. Well, guess what? Wrong. All code is cost. That's all we can be sure of. All code is cost. It takes time to create, it takes time to debug, it takes time to maintain. Some code is value. Right? So the idea with refactoring is to create value indirectly by removing the waste. Keep the code clean and simple. Right? So maybe we only need this little code to do whatever this thing does. Embrace change is one of the core mantras of extreme programming, and you can only change a code base if it's clean. Otherwise, it'll break every time you change it. So what is clean code? Well, there's a good set of guidelines from Kent Beck. Simple code passes all tests, has no duplication, is readable, so not only the author can read it, and is minimal. And these are in priority order, right? So can you remove a method? Can you remove a class? That's good, but not if it makes the code less readable, etc. Very good kind of rule set. It's hard though. It looks very simple, but it's hard. So I can recommend, make sure people get a chance to attend courses, read stuff, experiment, and learn. Clean code is hard, but it really pays off. So that was kind of some parts of XP, XP in a nutshell. And we're about halfway point, so how about this? Let's take a 60-second break, stand up, don't go out of the room. Just 60 seconds, talk to your neighbor about something, and then we continue. Right. Go ahead and stand up, you need it. It's the shortest break in the world. Not even time to go to the toilet. Can do that next break. Try that at a meeting. Try taking a 1-minute break every half hour in a meeting. I promise you it'll be more effective. It's amazing. Okay, now that you're all awake again and you reset your mind, let's talk about Kanban. How many of you are familiar with Kanban? Oh, that was a lot. That's interesting. That must be your fault. So the whole idea with Kanban started here. I grew up in Tokyo, and there's this great park called Imperial Palace Gardens. And there, when you come into the park, they give you like... They give you a card. They give you a card in your hand when you come in. It doesn't say anything on the card. It doesn't cost anything. You put it in your pocket. And you walk around in the park. And when you walk out of the park, the guard collects the card. He says, I want it back again. So why? What? Counting, yeah. The idea is that when the cards run out on the table, nobody gets to come in. So it's a way of limiting how many people are in the park. Very simple. The guard doesn't have to count, right? So it's a way of using a physical item to regulate a flow. And this is the core of Kanban. So signaling system, it's visual and it's limited in supply, right? We don't want too many people in the park at the same time. It gets too crowded. So there's another Kanban system, right? It's visual, it's limited in supply, and it's used to regulate the flow of resources. And it should be limited in supply, otherwise you get problems, right? This is a Zimbabwe $10 million bill. Forgot the limit, darn. So in software development, visualize the workflow. In other words, what are the steps in our process? And what is the content of our process right now? What are the things that are in our process right now? And limit it. We only want to be working on at most 3 things at a time. Otherwise, things will just sit and wait. So you put limits all across the whole board. How many things do we need in this queue? And then you measure and optimize flow. How long does it take for a card from when it appears over here until it flows across there? How long time is that? You can measure that. You can optimize it. And explicit policies. What are the rules? Because in Kanban doesn't give you very many rules, so you have to make them up yourself. And make them explicit on the wall, because then you can question it and criticize it and therefore improve it. So visualize the rules so that you can improve them. Definition of done is an example of such a rule. Right? The WIP limits, working in progress, are examples of the rules or policies. Here's an example of a pretty big Kanban board, and we have about 3 teams here doing their daily meeting in front of this big board. So it looks kind of like Scrum. It looks kind of similar, but there are some important differences. So before I get into more about Kanban, I want to talk about comparing things. Because now we've talked about XP and Scrum and Kanban. So which one is best? It depends. Here are two tools. Fork and knife. So which one's best? Any preference? Who thinks the fork is best? Hands up. Knife is better. It's kind of a meaningless question, right? It depends on the context. So it's the same when you compare Scrum and XP and Kanban. There is no such thing as X is better than Y. It depends on your context. Sometimes you need a bit of both. If I'm going to eat a big steak, I need both the fork and the knife. If I'm going to eat soup, these are both pretty bad. Right? So it's all kind of contextual. But it's still worth comparing, as long as you compare for understanding and not for judgment. So if we look at these tools, like Kanban, Scrum, XP, and some other tools, they all fit under the same umbrella of lean and agile principles. And there's some overlap too. If we compare a bunch of tools on a scale of prescriptive versus adaptive. So prescriptive means lots of rules, adaptive means not so many rules. Right? Scrum might come in the middle with maybe 9 or 10 rules. These are the things like the product owner role and the sprint planning meeting. These are the things in Scrum. Kanban has only 3 or 4. It's very little in Kanban, so it's more flexible. But if flexible was better, then that would mean this process is the best, right? Just do whatever. It's very flexible. Right? So the value in a tool is in how it limits you, right? Complete flexibility isn't really a good idea. So XP has a bit more. It includes most of Scrum plus some engineering stuff. We have RUP. I couldn't fit more on the slide. There's actually more, right? It's huge, and they all fit together too. There's rules such as who goes to which meeting and which artifacts come in, which artifacts come out. It's really, really big. However, you're not supposed to use all of that. You're supposed to use a subset, right? So it's possible to use RUP in an agile way, except that very few manage to do it because there's just too much to choose from. Now, the key difference here is that in Scrum, you get too little, and you're supposed to add the missing parts. In RUP, you get too much, and you're supposed to remove the stuff you don't need. And in the RUP case, that's a big upfront decision. You configure your RUP process. It's a big upfront decision. The problem with upfront decisions is upfront is the point in time when you know the least, right? So you make the worst decisions upfront. I think that's what's happening. Is people configure the RUP process and they get stuck with something very big. In Scrum, you don't need to decide upfront, what are we going to add later? You add it when you're missing it. So it's more evolutionary. So there's a good quote by this guy, Miyamoto Musashi, a famous 17th century samurai. He got famous because he actually got old. And he kept his limbs and his life and got old. That wasn't typical for a samurai in the 17th century Japan. Right? He used multiple swords at the same time and had other interesting techniques. So he said, do not develop Japanese English. Do not develop an attachment to any one weapon or any one school of fighting. Right? That's him speaking. So basically, don't fall in love with Scrum or XP or RUP or any of these. They're just tools. Right? Find your combination. So maybe you do all of Scrum, and maybe you add pair programming and continuous integration from XP. Maybe you do limit work in progress from Kanban, and maybe you add things like domain model or maybe use case way of thinking from RUP. Mix and match. Right? Find your process. So I'm going to illustrate Kanban by showing how does it look like if you come in and observe a Kanban team in action. This is a bit simplified because I want to keep it short. But it's mainly to give you a general idea. It's based on, I did this as a comic on my blog. So this is an animated version of my comic. So here's a sunny day in Kanban land, and afterwards I'll do a rainy day in Kanban land. In the sunny day, we have a backlog here, all the stuff we want to do at some point. And over here is the most important things. So what are the 2 things that we need to do next? Now the team only needs 2 things in the queue to keep themselves busy. They don't need more. It'll just pile up. So they asked the product owner to just choose the 2 most important things. And the team starts working on this one. And when it gets done, they start working on that one. In the meantime, there are some people who may be putting this into production. Now note here, when this one gets empty, when this gets empty, that's a signal to the product owner. Hey, the team is running out of stuff to do. Now is the time to start thinking about what they should do next. So just-in-time planning. And then they put this into production, and we have this nice kind of one-piece flow is what it's called. Right? So it's a sunny day in Kanban land. everything is fine and dandy. The interesting thing is the rainy day, so let's go to the rainy day. I was hoping for more sun here I was hoping for more sun here in Madrid. What happened? Someone's got to find the button to fix the climate, right? Where's that button? Right, rainy day in Kanban land. The product owner says, well, given our history that on average it's 9 days for something to get done across this board. We've measured and we've seen that it takes on average 9 days. Of all the things in the whole world, which two things do I most want to have within 9 days? That's the decision point. Oh, A and B, okay? Now these two guys start working on A as a pair. These two people start working on B because they felt that it'd be too many people if we all work on A, it'll get too crowded. So they decide to work on B. You know, that's what being self-organizing means. You make those kind of decisions. Who's going to work on what, what's most effective. So this was the most effective way for them to get A and B done. One pair on each. Product owner starts planning for the next step. A gets done. Now, so this is developers and testers. Here's operations guys. And they try to put this into production. In the meantime, this pair starts working on the next thing. Bang. Something went wrong. Stack trace, problems, right? So what happens? Well, these guys finish B, and the product production guys split up and try to, get B done while the other guy tries to fix A. Now is the interesting part. There's a limit here. It says 3. We only want to have 3 things in progress. And we have 3. So their default reaction would normally be pull in the next thing and start working on it. But now they have to stop. Wait a sec. During the daily meeting, it'll be like, wait a sec, we can't start something new because our buffer is full here. So what do? Well, there's only one thing to do. Go and help. Ask them, how can I help you? And they might say, well, please look at this stack trace, or please get coffee, right? Or please, please write some more tests, or please rewrite this part, or whatever, right? So we are at your service. I'm willing to help you to get this thing done. So this is just like the paper jam situation, right? We have a paper jam. Go fix that. Don't add more paper. Product owner is adding more work here, but there's a limit there. So he can't pile on more work. It's like the paper tray is limited in size, right, for the printer. So let's say this problem is propagating. Sooner or later, this guy will get stuck too. And what am I going to do? I can't pull in anything else, so I better go help. After a while, maybe even the product owner will come in and say, I can't order anything new because my buffer here is full. So what's the problem? Can I help? And they might say, oh, yeah, please help. Please go and buy this new test server that we're going to need. Please get money for that and buy it. And please block the door so nobody can come in and disturb us. And please go get lunch, right? Whatever. So help out. And with that kind of focus, the problem tends to get solved over time. And when that happens, the system will stabilize. So it's all about helping each other. It's all about focusing on the bottleneck. Those of you who have read anything about theory of constraints will recognize this as an implementation of the principles of theory of constraints. There's always a bottleneck and it moves around. How much time do we have? 15 minutes. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of a Kanban board. Because it's very important to realize that this board doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It evolves from something simple to something very customized. So here's an example from one of my clients. Now it's a bit dark here, but this was April 7th, very rough. April 23, fairly advanced board. They've evolved probably 3 or 4 times just within that period, right? So I've collected a whole bunch of patterns that I've seen from Kanban teams and tried to pick out the common things that they're doing, kind of best practices. Now, I don't like the term best practices because that sounds like it's best. So let's just say common practices. Right? And I put them on one big template here. You can download it from this URL here, crisp.sc/kanban/example. I'll just show how a typical kind of path of evolution for a Kanban team. They start by visualizing what's going on. That's a good step. What are we working on? Let's put that up on the wall. And then maybe they start visualizing what's our definition of done. When we say something is done, what do we mean? It's good to clarify that with other stakeholders. Code clean, checked in on trunk. Integration, regression tested. Running on the user acceptance test environment. Great. Next step, maybe they start visualizing what happens downstream, what happens after us. When this card moves off the wall, where does it go? And they start tracking that. So there's some kind of a customer acceptance thing going on here, and then it goes to production. Okay. Next, they decide to try to clarify, how do we know which ones of these are done so they can be pulled into here? So they make a little sub-column there to illustrate which items are ready to be pulled. Next, they decide to introduce a buffer so that if they run out of stuff to do and the product owner isn't nearby, there's a little buffer of they know what to do next. We continue. Maybe they decide to add a date. When something gets on the board, they write down a date on the card. And then when it gets off the board, they log the date and how long time it was on the board. And then they can get statistics for cycle time. Good for planning. Plus, it's very useful because when the team is deciding which item should I pull today, well, just take the item with the oldest date. Right? That's been sitting on the board the longest. Let's do first in, first out. Very nice and consistent. Next, they add work in progress limits. And now it's a Kanban board. Until you have these, you shouldn't call it a Kanban board because it's just pieces of paper on a wall, which is of course useful too, but it's just not Kanban. Right? So when you start putting limits, that's when it gets interesting. Because now you have constraints, right? Like I showed you in the last example, people have to start cooperating and you can't just add work to the process. So adding limits turns this into a pull scheduling system. Next, they decide that they want to have some kind of a task breakdown step. So they introduce that here and they break things into tasks. Now it starts looking very much like Scrum. And they decide to try to distinguish which tasks are done and are there any tasks that are blocked. So they add a little coding for that. And they start tracking, what about defects? If you found problems here during acceptance, let's visualize the defects so we can fix them. Right? And let's keep track of who's doing what. So we go to southparkstudios.com and we create avatars for everybody. And we print them out and put them on magnets, right? And stick them up on the wall. So now we can see who's doing what. Very good. And maybe we add some items, maybe have a deadline. This has to be done by Christmas or else we're in trouble. So we put that up. And since there are now many types of things on the wall, we might need to add some guidelines. What to pull first? And if I'm finished with my task, what should I do next? So I won't get into details, but let's say we add some levels of priority. 1 star means priority. 2 stars means panic. So 2 stars means stop everything you're doing and just fix this right now. Experiment. Right? Find your process. But these are some common patterns that I've collected on this one board. I'll be doing a workshop right after this session where we'll be doing this kind of stuff. Kanban and value stream mapping workshop. The important thing is don't standardize the board across an organization. Let them evolve separately. Very important. That's also why it's useful to have a physical wall rather than an electronic tool. You can use an electronic tool, but don't do that from the beginning. Start with the wall because the wall can evolve very quickly. You can change it very quickly. Most tools are hard to change. So I'm going to wrap this up by talking a little bit about combining these different tools. So here's an example. A very common pattern is companies that have used Scrum for a long time, they find that Scrum is good, it works, so let's use Scrum for everything. And they start doing Scrum in sales, Scrum in operations, Scrum in, Scrum everywhere. And they find that it works pretty well, but not perfectly in all situations. So, for example, the operations team might say that sprints don't make sense for us. Why should we sit and plan several weeks of work? We are a reactive group. Things come in and we do them. So we don't want to say, go away, come back next sprint. But the other stuff in Scrum is great. Daily Scrums and product backlog and all this stuff. So when I describe Kanban to them, they're normally like, oh, finally, yes, this fits us much better. It's a pattern that I'm seeing. The nice thing is that Kanban and Scrum, they fit very nicely together. So you can have Scrum team over here, Kanban team over here, and a hybrid over here. And they're all communicating with each other, and it just seems to work quite well. One decision point then is input and output to our process. Right? Scrum looks like this. We have combined 4 different cycles into one. So planning commit is a sprint planning meeting. What are the priorities and how much stuff are we going to do this sprint? We decide there. At the end, something comes out, some kind of release, or at least something demonstratable, and some kind of process improvement meeting, right? So these are 4 different things in one. And we do the same thing over and over again. So it's a very nice and clean solution, but it's maybe sometimes a bit too simplistic. So Kanban team number 1 might do the same. They say, this is fine. But Kanban team number 2 might decide to do differently. They say, well, retrospectives every 4 weeks. 1 whole day every 4 weeks. We look at the data and we improve our process. Every second week we do planning. So we set the priorities and we don't do commit, skip commit. We don't try to estimate how much stuff we're going to get done. We just do. And then we measure how much stuff we got done. And that gives us enough to build a plan ahead. We save a bit of time. Right? So planning just means filling up the input queue on the board, making sure it's not empty. Release we do every week. Whenever it's on Friday, we just release whatever's done. Release it. So they've now split these different things into 3 different cycles. Kanban team number 3 is more event driven. So they say, well, retrospectives every 4 weeks. Let's do that. Planning is on demand. So when the team is about to run out of stuff to do, they trigger a planning meeting. We need to have more stuff to do. When the product owner wants to change priorities, he triggers a planning meeting. New priorities, and he changes the left column. So planning happens whenever it's needed. And release is on demand too. So we release whenever we have something that needs to be released. We release it. Sometimes it's every week, sometimes it takes a month. So when you use Kanban, this is a decision point. You need to decide what is our input and output process. Another important decision point is estimation. Should we not estimate at all? Should we just count the features? Some teams do that. Should we estimate in using t-shirt size? So, large, medium, small. We don't know if large is 5 times bigger or 3 times bigger than medium. We just know it's large. It's weeks, and medium maybe is days. This is the most common, at least the recommended model in most agile processes, estimating story points. That's the example I brought up earlier with the planning poker. And some estimate in days. Choose. If you're not sure, experiment. Right? A lot of teams get stuck in one model without realizing that they could actually try another one. Maybe they spend way too much time arguing over these days. Well, take a step back and think about, is this valuable? Is this estimation valuable to us? If not, should we stop estimating? Should we stop all estimation? Or should we just make it a bit higher level, there or there? Same thing with tasks. Skip tasks, or maybe break these backlog items into action points, into tasks, but don't estimate them. Just count them. Or estimate them in days, estimate in hours, experiment. Now here's an important misunderstanding. Some Scrum teams decide to go to Kanban because they're tired of estimating. They're tired of too much estimation. They say Scrum is too many meetings and too much estimation. Well, you don't have to do that in Scrum. You can decide how much to estimate and at what level. So even though this is typical Scrum, you don't have to be stuck here. So if you find that your team is spending 50% of every daily Scrum arguing over little numbers on yellow stickies, try just not having the numbers, see what happens. And this is typical Kanban, but you can still, of course, do this in Kanban as well. So both are flexible. So those were some examples of kind of customization decisions you need to be making. All right, I think my time is about to run out. So, final points. Don't be dogmatic. Right? We consultants sometimes tend to be dogmatic. Thou shalt limit work in progress, otherwise you are a bad person. Or go away, don't talk to us, we're in a sprint. Right? Come back in 3 weeks. That's kind of over-interpreting Scrum. The idea is a team should be able to work in peace. That doesn't mean don't talk. Right? It doesn't mean lock the door. Remember the first point of the Agile Manifesto. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Right? So if you do this, it's just not agile. And experiment. So there are maybe some things we want to achieve, we want to optimize. Capacity or velocity. We want to have as much stuff done as possible during a given period of time. We want as little time as possible per given feature. The highest quality and maybe the highest possible predictability so we can make plans. So how do we achieve this? Well, experiment. So what buttons can we press? Well, we can do many small teams, or do we do a few large teams? And then experiment, see what happens. Or maybe a low work in progress limits or high work in progress limits. Do we have a lot of columns on the board or just a few? Do we do short iterations, long iterations, no iterations? Are they time boxed? Do iterations include commitment or not? Do we do lots of planning? Do we do little planning? All these are kind of experiments, decision points. Right? So it's important to do the experiments and also to measure the results. Using simple tools such as velocity. You can measure the lead time. When does an item enter the product backlog? When did it get into production? That gives you lead time. You can measure that. Defect rate, etc. There are some skills you need to nail down. You need to be really good at no matter what agile process you use. You can't hide from these. One is splitting the system into useful pieces. Taking the big thing you're going to build and dividing it up into small deliverables. If you can't do that, no agile process, will help you, really. So that's the first step. Craftsmanship. If you can't write clean code that works and that's tested, no agile process will help you. Visualization. Now, I added this. This is more my personal reflection. I found that it's such an immense value if you can visualize things, what's going on, in whatever way. So if you're having a problem, make it visible. If people aren't motivated, start measuring that. Make that visible. People start talking about motivation. If you're having trouble with long lead times and too much work in progress, start visualizing the work in progress. It tends to be very interesting results just by showing the problem in a very clear way. And retrospectives, these are tied together. If you can visualize a problem and you take the time to stop and think, right, then you can improve things. So there's some teams that don't do retrospective because they're in a hurry. And this is just not a very good idea because it's kind of like, oh, I'm in such a hurry, I have to run. I don't have time to stop and tie my shoes. Or I have all these trees to chop down. I don't have time to stop and sharpen my axe because I am so busy chopping down trees, etc. It's just, you have to do retrospectives. Stop and think and improve your process. If they're not working for you, get a coach, get help, right? There are plenty of people around who can help you. So I want to end with this picture. Perfection is a direction, it's not a place. If you read about agile methods, it just looks so nice and pretty. It's not. It's just like any project, it gets kind of dirty and messy. It's not about achieving perfection, it's about always seeing improvement. So is our current iteration better than the last one? Is this year better than last year? That's the key. And then agile is more like the direction to move. So the important thing is not your process, the important thing is your process for improving your process. So I think that's about it. Thanks for coming and have a great conference, and I'll see you in the hallways, I guess. Right?
Thank you, Henrik, for your talk. Is there any question for him? No questions? One question? We only have 5 minutes because we are with a little delay. So please, 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, no more.
I'm going to make a little question, but I'm going to claim for your experience, your personal experience dealing with clients. Imagine a traditional client, I need all that things, and I need 1.5 years later. About planning, it could be suitable to make a white plan. We're going to make 10 sprints first to do that. Or perhaps let's focus on our first 3 or 4 more important features and we talk about the rest later. What could be the best option? Option 1 is to give a wide, perhaps not very deep plan, or tell your client we are going to focus 3 or 4 more important features for now, and we talk about the rest later.
So I would propose a bit of both. We'll say that we're going to focus on the 3 most important features now, and as it looks like right now, it looks like this is what's going to come later. But if you want to change your mind, that's okay. Now, the length of the planning horizon is contextual. In some environments, you don't need a long planning horizon. In other environments, you do. So most of the answer is kind of like, it depends. Did that make sense? Yeah.
Next question.
Hi. When you talked about experimentation to find the best combination of width limits, number of iterations, etc., do you think we should do that for each project or for the team? I mean, maybe you have a short project and you have no time for experimentation, but on the other hand, I think these are characteristics that that depends on each project. So, what do you think about it?
But over time, you might start noticing patterns. So the definition of done starts looking the same for many teams. So then you might establish some common ground. So maybe here's our common definition of done for all teams because it makes life easier to have the same one. Or maybe some common like coding rules or coding principles. The important thing is if you do standardize across many teams, there must be a way of changing the standard. So maybe a cross-team retrospective regularly inspects and maybe changes the standard. But I'd say start with too few standards rather than too many in that case.
Hello. It's not an asked, it's a quote or asking you for advice or your opinion about one thing that happened in our company. Okay. Now we are organized and structured based on Scrum. We have a Scrum Master knowledge group, a Scrum leader. He's in charge of find people to make the product. Okay, we were training people in Scrum, a lot of people, and we have people doing coaching to some group, but another groups doesn't have coaching. Depends of the available the people are. Okay, and this is because you mentioned that don't force people to use all of that. You can you have to find out your own combination. But we find out that people were using a combination that is very, very, very bad. And we think that in that kind of conference, we can warn people that if you don't understand Scrum well, you can do things better, worse than before. Okay, and 2 days ago we found people, project leaders or that were using Scrum to control people. People were not working at a suitable pace. They were working that smart, very, very that smart. They said, the product leader said, this is the sprint, 2 weeks, okay? And this is your task. You have to end your tasks in 2 weeks. And people were doing extra hours, a lot of extra hours, and they are very angry. And they said, Scrum is shit. Okay, and I think it's a problem not to know something well, okay?
It sounds to me kind of similar, like I take a guitar and I try to blow in it. And I say, this guitar is shit. It doesn't work. Any tool can be misused. So what I would look for in that case is how can I help them see that it's being misused? Because what you just described was not Scrum. If there's a project manager handing out tasks, that it's not Scrum. And if they're calling it Scrum, then that's the problem. So I guess the first thing we would do is maybe to find out why are they calling this thing Scrum. If they can realize that it's not Scrum, then we can start talking about, well, do we want to use Scrum? Or what do we want to do? But it's a good question because it's quite common with any tool that gets popular is that it gets misused. So part of our job here is to help to stop that from happening.
The last question, please.
Hello. How can I deal with the first and the only answer a possible new client wants from me? The question is how much it will cost.
I would start by asking how much do you want it to cost, right? And then once we'd established that, we could talk about, well, okay, let's talk about what it is and how much of it we can give you for that value. So let's say they decide that, well, okay, let's say it's €1 million. Then the next thing would say, okay, we're not going to do a project for €1 million. We're going to do a project for €100,000 and give you a very small subset of this. So we can fix the budget at €1 million, but our project is going to be much smaller, just to deliver something. This is the same model as with the venture capitalists who are going to invest in a startup. They don't give them a whole bunch of money from the beginning. They give them a little bit of money, seed funding, and they say, impress me. And then if they get impressed by what's get delivered, then they get a whole bunch of more money. So the venture capitalist decides how much it should cost by just giving them, I'm only giving you this much money. That's all you're getting. And then try to give me as much value as possible for that amount of money. And if you succeed in that, we can start doing more and bigger.
So the answer is to find intelligent clients, but not all of them are intelligent. They only want to know how much it will cost. So it will find the cheaper company or something.
That's also an interesting question. If the client says how much shall it cost, if it is undefined, then you can just make up any kind of arbitrary number, right? And you can't be wrong. Now, if it is a big requirement spec and you actually don't know what it's going to cost, then you have some choices, right? A, lie, or B, find another client, or C, try to educate the client. And there are advantages and disadvantages to each choice, so I can't tell you which one to use. But it boils a lot down to, does your company want to survive in the long term or just in the short term? Okay, shall we? What's the next step?
Thank you again.